Hello and welcome to Business Tales, the podcast where we dive deep into the past, the present and the future of the business journey. I'm your host, Chris Simmons, and I'm thrilled to have you here as we explore the stories behind the successes, challenges and lessons. In each episode, we'll uncover the good, the bad and the invaluable experiences that shape our professional lives. So whether you're an entrepreneur, a seasoned executive, or just someone passionate about business, there's something here for everyone. Without any further ado, let's dive into the conversation. Hello everyone, today's guest is a brand creation powerhouse who's developed 400 more brands than Heinz. The man who could probably turn a loaf of bread into a household name if he wanted to. He's the author of Become the Go-To Brand and has helped brand building for over 457 businesses. He became the youngest MD of a top 200 UK advertising agency where he spent 10 years perfecting the brand bucket program. In short, he helps organizations sell more stuff and make a healthy profit whilst doing it, which isn't really any big deal. It's easy, isn't it? These days, he's enjoying the portfolio life, running a boutique business development agency with a client list that would make most people's heads spin. He's worked with everyone from Fortune 500 giants to startups, spoken at over 17,000 businesses globally, and volunteers as a freeman with the Worshipful Company of Entrepreneurs. Please welcome the branding genius, Barnaby Wynter.
Morning, Chris. Afternoon, Chris. Evening, Chris. It really depends when you're listening to.
Did I even do you any justice with my intro? I really hope I did.
No. If I'd written it myself, I would have probably toned it down a bit.
And one thing that really stuck out when I was writing this, based on the bio that you gave me in your LinkedIn and also all the years we've known each other, I didn't realize that 17,000 businesses globally was even remotely achievable. Without sounding harsh, Barnaby, that's quite a long career, right?
It's a long career, yes, and it's unfortunately time passes. Yeah, I've been at it 35 years. I've been a professional speaker since 2009, so that's quite some years. So, and in my heady days, I was probably speaking 4 times a year, including in places like Iran and Australia and across Europe, as well as mainly in the UK. And being a saddo that I am, I have a spreadsheet where I put down all the number in the audience against the spreadsheet against every speaking gig that I've ever done, and therefore it now adds up to 17,000.
I'm not commenting on whether that's a saddo thing or not, but spreadsheets are great, everyone. So, as I said, you're a brand creation powerhouse. 457 brands to your name.
Yes.
That's not one brand isn't easy to create and manage for most people. So like there's got to be a lot in there from an experience point of view, from a where do you even start with that? Like brand one, but how did you get there? How did you start that?
Well, so I think first of all we've got to start by defining what we mean by brand, because often there's a big mistake made, and
just a logo, right?
Well, exactly, just a logo, exactly. So that is not what I do, in fact, and that's not an uncommon response whenever I ask people on stage in business meetings. You know, what do you think a brand is? They say it's a logo or an ID or a personality, and I say, well, why have you spent so much money bringing me in to design your logo? Just go and do something online, and have something for 30 quid. The problem is most people think brand is branding. And branding is where effectively you're creating the clothes that a business wears and presents itself in the marketplace. So that's a logo, a look and feel, maybe a tone, etc. That's branding, right? That's not brand. So brand is much more than that. And in truth, when I became youngest MD of the top 200 agency, that at its heart was this thing called the brand bucket. And I walked into my first board meeting and said, I know what a bucket is. What's a brand? And we had that day, I think, 148 years experience of creating famous brands, over 2,000, I think it would have added up to. And we couldn't define it. So we spent some time defining brand, and we define brand now as every experience that affects the relationship between a product or service and its buyer. Now, so what I've been doing throughout my career is I've been working across the marketing mix and then applying marketing thinking to systems and processes inside businesses. So that sounds even more complex than designing a few logos or 457 logos.
Certainly
One
does.
of the outputs of that, of course, are the logo, if that needs changing, or the storytelling or whatever. But it's really important that as a business, what you're doing is you're making every element of your business face towards the people that buy from you. Where that's been very exciting for me is having started my career 35 years ago, majority of business were not designed that way. They were designed to make the business owners successful. They built systems and processes that allowed them scalability and all that sort of thing, but they were very operationally led. Whereas today, if you're building a business, it has to be all about the people who buy from you. Now, actually going in and fixing that is actually a far faster process than people give it merit, because all you have to do is make sure you define what the story is you want the market to really care about you, and then you just apply that story to every element in your business. So I've been doing that since the late 80s, across a number of agencies, including my own, and I've had my own agency for 25 years. And at any given time, I'm probably working on 30 to 40 businesses doing exactly that.
So that doesn't happen overnight. And 35 years ago feels like, well, 35 years is a long time, but it's a blink of an eye to most as well when it comes to careers. You didn't just wake up one morning after you finished school and go, right, 457 businesses and counting, go. Where did you start? What got you even nudged in this direction?
Well, so that's a good question. So I failed my A-levels the first time, resat them, got to university, did psychology, and with the full intention of becoming an educational psychologist and working with children. And halfway through a 4-year degree up in Scotland, I realised that I didn't wear cord trousers, I didn't have Clark shoes, and I didn't have spectacles and all that sort of thing. And I realised I wasn't going to be an educational psychologist. So I went actually to the careers office, and in those days you could do a questionnaire thing, and then it would give you a computer printout with holes down the side where all the pages were connected together. It came out of a printing machine. And I went through that, and in it had, you could become a physicist, because I was doing it in the science faculty, social worker, or advertising. And I thought, well, advertising, that sounds interesting. I thought, well, I'd look into that, and I found that was really cool. So then found there were 2 colleges in the UK, one in Watford, one in Bristol, that did a postgraduate advertising course. And I unfortunately was enjoying being a young man too much, missed the deadline for applying to Watford. They interviewed me nevertheless and said, fantastic, you're exactly the kind of person we would like on our course, but we can't accept you this year, you've applied too late, so go the following year. So I went to Australia, bought a motorbike, I rode around the outside, and then I spent a year doing that. And then I came back and did a postgraduate diploma in advertising, got bored with that after about 6 weeks. So I also did one in marketing. So I did a diploma in marketing and a postgraduate diploma in advertising. And then realizing I still didn't know anything about, I mean, education is great, but it doesn't teach you anything about anything. So I thought I'd better go and work in the industry and see if I liked it. So I went and worked for nothing in an agency in Portman Square called Lonsdale's on the Abbott National account. Very exciting, got moved around different departments to see which one I like. And they then offered me a job in research. And I said, no, that's not for me. I want to be an account man. I want to be a suit. I want to do strategy. I want to learn about how business works, all that sort of thing. And and I got a job in a small agency to launch the Fiat Ducato, the Fiat Fiorino, work on Weber carburetors, RJ Hole car leasing, and Scania. So I had a CV.
Is this in the spreadsheet somewhere, or are you just recalling this really easily?
No, this is just the thing about having a life, is sometimes you can remember some of it. And I know it's unusual for me, as you know, but I took on my first mentor, and he sat down and said, I said, what do I do next? And he said, well, let's have a look at your CV. And he said, oh, you've got a CV to die for if you want to stay in the automotive advertising world. It's always going to be the second largest purchase anyone will ever make. Big decision-making process, blah, blah, blah. And so that sounds good. He said, what else could you do? And he said, well, you could work across lots and lots of different types of businesses. And maybe later in your career, you'll become more about business than necessarily just advertising and all that stuff. I said, oh, that's fantastic. What should I do? And he said, am I right in saying that you have a Vespa scooter and a VW Beetle Cabriolet? And I said, yes, that's correct. And I still, until last year, had both. My scooter was stolen, unfortunately, and so I decided to give it up. And he said, well, whatever you do, do not go into the motor industry. You're going to get absolutely mullered. You've got a hairdryer in a girl's car, and you'll get killed by people at the
what a straight talking mentor.
That was very good. And anyway, so I then pursued a career of multiple across lots of different brands from that point on. And I think there isn't a sector now that I haven't worked on.
And I think that overlapping of similar concepts but across different sectors does allow you to kind of build a big brain map of what's the right thing, for every individual needs and every individual scenario when it comes to both the branding stuff, the advertising stuff, and then the more holistic, like you say, everything that touches the customer side of things. One thing I read a couple of months ago, and I can't remember where I read it, it was someone explaining the difference between advertising and marketing. And they said, imagine a circus is coming to town and they put a poster up. That's advertising. Imagine that there's an article in the magazine talking about it coming to town. That's advertising. Imagine someone coming along and offering discounted tickets. That's advertising. And that marketing is the process and the thinking that actually ties all of this together. So that might be advertising, that might be PR, that might be this, that might be the other, but marketing is the glue that goes between all of these things. It's the bigger picture. Where do you sit with that kind of analogy or that explanation?
Yes, I think we have to be very, very careful here, because ostensibly everything you described is advertising. So wherever you put a message, wherever you broadcast a message, that's probably advertising. Marketing. So marketing is the discipline of creating every experience between a product or service and its buyer. And so therefore it applies to every element where actually a human being interfaces with your system and your process. That's essentially marketing. So that could be your packaging. It could be the way you stock your shop, or the way you stock your warehouse, or the way your website works, or how you write your instruction manuals. That's all part of anything that's about building this relationship between the product or service and the buyer. That for me is marketing. So it's vastly different. And then, of course, what's happened to advertising, it has become less and less relevant in the creation of relationships with buyers of your products or services.
So when you were starting out in this, I don't want to wear corduroys, suddenly advertising's appealing. What was the point at which you went, actually, yeah, this is for me? Did you have a big success, or was it just like something clicked in your mind that you just went, I'm in the right place?
Yeah, I think there were many factors to that. I think partly the culture that you get immersed in the big advertising agencies is just was in those days was extraordinary. I'm less familiar with it now.
Ironically, they mostly wear corduroys now.
Well, that's possibly true. Yeah, possibly true. And what goes around comes around, of course. I do accept that. The other thing, there is the thing that still makes me jump out of bed every morning. I mean, literally jump out of bed, is when that moment when the idea appears. And the marketing world is one of the few industries in my observation where every day an idea appears. And what you do is you create the environment for that idea to occur. The idea appears, and then what you do is you nurture the idea into a real world. It's like giving birth to ideas every single day, and sometimes multiple ideas in a day. And I think in my first job, that was happening straight away. And just to be near that fusion of the environment to a point where it creates this idea is just, I think, to be honest, Chris, it's addictive. It's addictive.
Yeah.
And for that reason, I think from day one, I was in rooms where people were having ideas and I'm going, and then you could contribute to it, and you saw the idea grow in front of your eyes, and you're part of it. I mean, at the end of the day, I can't give you the exact point, but I think right from the word go, wow.
Yeah. It is that wow. There's something that's being created almost from nothing. And in most industries, like you say, that's in most industries or most disciplines, that's almost impossible now. Something either exists or it doesn't exist. And the idea is that little spark that suddenly pops up, that then you go, oh, there's a dot that connects to that. And those two dots that connect suddenly become something which is articulatable eventually. And I don't know about you, but that I can almost feel as an idea is coming up, because there's a like a scratch in the back of your head, kind of there's something there, or whatever it is that does work in some way or another, and can't even articulate it at that point what it is, and then it becomes something a bit more.
I don't experience that actually.
Oh,
That's
right.
really interesting. I don't experience that at all. Fairness.
Well, I mean, you've refined your craft a lot more than I have.
Well, possibly. No. So what I really work hard at is making sure. I mean, often people talk about out of the box thinking, and the only way to have out of the box thinking is to fill a box.
Yeah.
And so what I have spent 35 years doing is filling the box. And so therefore what I'm doing is my process is about taking a box and say, in there is the idea, but we got to keep piling stuff into it. And eventually an idea emerges from there. So I don't have ideas. Ideas emerge and come out of the more you put into the box. And then you go, oh, actually, if we connect that with that, as you rightly say, it's about connecting, and that with that, that's going to create something that nobody's ever seen before. And therefore that's going to have merit. Now let's go and use that as a hypothesis in terms of human behavior and relationship building, and put it in front of people. And then people go, oh, that's really clever. And then you go, okay, I've got something. Yeah. Yeah. And that's the process. So I don't have ideas, but I'm full of ideas. If that makes sense.
I got it. Yeah, no, I've got it. So now I don't want to get too metaphysical with you.
I realised where I was going.
But there's a concept which is known as the Akashic record, which essentially means that every bit of information and knowledge that ever existed and will exist already exists in some sort of ether.
Yes.
And at some point in time, that bucket or box of yours is so full, and the dot that gets connected, those two things already existed and the idea already existed. You've just identified it and plucked it out.
And do you know what? That makes sense to me. I think that.
There you go. Look it up afterwards. Go on. Look it up afterwards. Don't trust Wikipedia, though. Let's talk about the Brown Bucket program, though, because in the intro I said that you spent 10 years perfecting what it is.
Yes,
I'm a brand new business. I've gone to market already, but it's not working for me. I'll knock on your door, send you an email, pick up the phone. How does it work?
So there are really 7 key steps to it. And bear in mind, this is the end of 10 years work. So if it sounds short and sweet, it's highly considered. First thing you will do is you've got to come up with a value proposition. So what's your story that you're going to tell the market? What is the business? What's the value that the business brings to the market? And that's really defined by 4 sets of values. The first set of values is your behavioral style. They all begin with B because I'm Brown Bucket. Behavioral style. So what's the tone? What do you think? Because we buy from people we like. And so therefore what you've got to do is you've got to create a tone to your brand, which people say, I like that, and can help you distinguish you from other brands, which they might not like. The next thing you've got to do is you've got to define your benefits. Most business owners that start businesses and indeed run businesses are very well versed in features, and nobody buys features. People use features to distinguish you from other people and see you do what other people do. And it puts you into a competitive scenario. But if you turn those into benefits, then people go, I can see why that's going to be useful for me. The third set of values are beliefs in the spirit of Stephen R. Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Be proactive, number 1. Number 2, begin with the end in mind. When you're creating a brand, you have to really have a clear vision of what you want the brand to elicit in your prospects and your customers before you start, because then you can judge the work. And then finally, something you want to be famous for, just a single statement of intent, which you want to be famous for. You have to have those in place before you do anything. And most businesses don't do that. They've seen a gap, they've been good at something, they think, et cetera, et cetera. And actually that's a very poor start point for a business. So that's foundation stone. The second foundation stone you really need is you need to understand your target market. There's a legacy from the broadcast advertising world, which dominated marketing 35 years ago, called demographics. Demographics was buried alongside the USP in 1995. I was at the funeral. Okay, so I can assure you that it is an entirely useless tool when it comes to brand building or marketing. And it was demographics was created by the broadcast industry to befuddle you out of your money, because what they were able to do is to slice the pie and say, we are going to target these, and not tell you that 80% of the money you're going to spend is entirely wasted on people who will never buy from you. So that's fundamentally changed now. So you have to create what we now call a psychographic profile, a profile of how people think, how they feel, what their experience is, what their understanding of your market is, how they're going to improve the quality of their life, etc., etc. That's who you're talking to. So those two are the foundations. So that's step one and step two. Step three then is we create a one-page business plan, because everything you do in marketing should be measured. Not a single thing should you be doing in your marketing mix now that cannot be measured. And what you're measuring it against is your ability to create net profit. Yep. And the function of business is to make money. And there are no other functions of business, in spite of what people think. And so therefore, we create a one-page business plan which links your vision. Then we create a marketing strategy, then a marketing action plan, and then we do a brand audit. So in other words, we walk through the journey that your prospects make, and then we adjust everything so it's aligned with the storytelling, and then finally we execute that creatively. And those are really the 7 steps. So that takes time, of course. It takes time.
Yeah. You know? And so I know that you said, this is a combination of 10 years, and if it sounds really short, it is well considered. The fact that you're able to say it so concisely explains and shows why it's taken 10 years to do. There's no waffle in that. That all makes sense. And if, much like all branding exercises that you would probably go through, if the customer doesn't understand it, then they don't know what they're buying. It is the culmination. It is great. Talking about 457 businesses over the last 35 years, I know that we love to talk about successes and wins and things like that because we're all kind of hardwired to look for the champagne. Where has it not worked in the past? Is there something that you can see out of all of the businesses you've worked with where it hasn't quite hit the mark, or something didn't quite click and you've learned from it?
Right. So you want me to talk about 456 of the businesses I've worked for, right? Okay. It's a soft landing on this one. No, listen, there are many, many lessons. It's hard to know where to begin. The first thing is that your marketing director, your marketing manager should be sitting in board meetings. And it's too often the case that they are a nice to have or a thing they perceived as fluffy cloud. So the first mistake that I learned very early on is that businesses weren't able to make the most of the brand because it was too disconnected from the intent of the board. And I remember reading on the Marketing Society site, we have a problem in the UK. Only 7% of the FTSE companies have a marketing director on the board, but 100% have a sales director on the board. And I think one of the things you've got to,
isn't it?
which was scary. I don't know if it still says it on there, but and they said we have a problem with the profile of marketing. And you go, no, you're absolutely right. There should be no sales director on the board as far as I'm concerned, and it should be a marketing director. So I'm biased, of course I'm biased, and because the concept of sales now is another dead art. And actually what you should be doing is building relationships with people who are already moving towards you. So that's the first thing. Marketing should be top of the list almost of every single board meeting. The second thing is be careful. We launched Decathlon in the UK, and we came up with a fantastic advertising campaign, which was called the Exemplar Strategy. So what we did is we managed to get them to find 6 or 7 products whereby they could feature a product on an ad, and then there were lots of, and they looked kind of a bit classified ads. So we created this campaign, and we ran it in their first 4 shops were in Surrey Keys, and they had 4 big areas there.
I've been to that one. Got my ski kit from there once.
Yeah, and now I think there's even 1 or half of a Decathlon there, but Decathlon's now all over the UK. And anyway, so we ran these ads in the now recently defunct Evening Standard, and 4-page ads. And the client rang us after the first one had run, and they said, "Hello, could we stop the advertising?" We said, "Why?" And he said, "Well, the ad that we run features a bicycle for £29. We said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, we've sold out." I said, "What do you mean?" And the strategy was you bring them in on a cheap product, and then they buy other stuff like helmets and saddle bags and all that. I said, "Okay, so we're going to run can we do the wetsuit one?" Okay, so we did the wetsuit one. So that was, I think, on a Thursday. On the Friday we ran the wetsuit one, and on the Monday we got a call saying we stopped running the wetsuit one. So why? Because we've run out of wetsuits, right? Okay, and we went through golf bag and I can't remember the other 3, but 6 products that we created for a month-long campaign, and we had run out of ads in 6 days. So one of the things that's really important is when you have to align your marketing with your business plan, because if you create inquiries, and you can't cope with inquiries, you haven't got anyone on the phone, there's no one there after 5 o'clock at night. There's, you can't cope with more than 2 leads a day or whatever. You have to really, really immerse yourself in the numbers. So one of the big lessons is marketing is not a fancy, good fun, go for lunch, come up with some ads, do a bit of YouTube advertising, all very exciting, bit of social media, all brilliant. You've got to have the systems and processes aligned with the possible outcome from marketing. That's really critical. I think the other thing is don't believe the BS. Clients, they tell fibs and they say, we can do that. And then you create strategies, and then you present the ideas and they go, actually, we can't do that. You said, but you said, good. You said, oh, well, we thought about it now. Now we see what you're doing. We realize that we don't really do that. You go, okay.
They said it just to get you on board. They really wanted you on board.
They're spending the money. At the end of the day, you sit there and go, but it just feels like a waste of life. And then the final thing is, I think you should always brief in writing. And one of the big mistakes, and I insist on this, that if a client is working with me, they have to send me a written brief, even if it's an email, and I'll teach them how to brief properly, but send me a written brief, because just that sitting down and trying to formulate your thought into something sensible on paper or on email changes. And do not do verbal briefings, because verbal briefings will cost you in your marketing an absolute arm and a leg, because you'll just meander around and you're using strategy to find out if it will stick, and then creative work to see if it sticks, and then you come up with ideas to see if it sticks, and then you go into the market and see. That's absolutely the wrong approach. You've got to be much more efficient. You can save a ton of money just by writing down what it is you want, rather than doing it verbally. So always make sure there's a written brief.
Just on that, I find that the act of writing something down for someone else to read is the best way of exercising the preventing people from being lazy. If you write it down so that they can understand it, you really have to think about it and you have to understand it yourself. Whereas if it's in a conversation in a boardroom, someone might not understand what you're meaning, but be too nervous and nod away and say yes, yes, yes. Or you might say something that, as you're saying it and formulating the words, say something slightly differently to your immediate intention. And the same thing flows through in the business processes as well, doesn't it? So clients come in, internal briefing of internal things, even for delegation of tasks, like having that as a mainstay within the business. Write it down or don't get it done.
Yeah. And I think we need to change the people think when you're making me write it down because you're trying to catch me out or police me or have a record on me, and they go, no, you're missing the point. The writing down, and I'm mentoring, I think 15 people at the moment, 15 business owners at the moment. And part of the mentoring sessions, they have to send me an email afterwards of what do we talk about? And that's part of my style of mentoring. And everybody says that's just so useful, because we've had this 90-minute conversation and I pulled out various bits. And then when I thought about it, it changed. It synthesizes the thinking. And I think that's absolutely critical if you're putting things in the box, because the things that go in the box have got to be real things. You can't just put any old rubbish in.
And it's it breeds accountability in teams as well, where you are at, say, board level. If the brief's written by the head of sales, you need that articulated in a way that the CEO will understand it, and the person that's actually doing the marketing will be able to understand it.
Yeah, and I don't like the word accountability because that's policing, but I do subscribe to what you're saying. I think it breeds communication. And one of the things that tends to go awry in fast-moving, scaling, growth businesses is communication tends to get lost a little bit along the way. And then everybody says, our culture and all that sort of thing. And actually, culture is just communication. It's just taking your brand values and making them live through everything you do. So
this morning, whilst I was having my morning coffee, sitting at the coffee table, thinking about the day ahead, looking in the calendar, and like, oh God, I'm going to speak to him. Oh, he's boring. He's got nothing to talk about. I thought, you know what? I'm going to have a little look at the Become a Go-To brand on Amazon, where it is available. And I had a little look through the the sample, and it's got like a list of all the chapters and things like that.
Yeah.
The list of, just for everyone listening, the list of chapters alone is almost like if I take this list of chapters, these are the things I absolutely need to learn and understand. Just reading that and the little bit and the sample at the beginning, I was like, this is a culmination of a lifetime of experience. How long did this take you to put together? It's like nearly 300 pages there. So how long did this take you to put together outside of the conceptual 35 years of experience?
Well, there's multiple answers to that. This book is really an update of the first book, which has done really, really well. So, which I published in 2010, which is the whole Brand Bucket program, and that's called the Brand Bucket Make the Marketing Work. And everybody said, this is a great what book? How do we do it? So what I started to do is write a book, which is how you do it as a business, so that you could do it. Because, in the end, I'm a limiting resource, and that's true of all businesses. They have a limiting resource. I can't work with everybody. So I thought I'd write a book. And so the nature of the book is a step-by-step. So at one level, there's a lifetime to write it in it, as you rightly say. In real terms, it's probably only that it's a summation of what's happened in the last 10 years. I have seen a fundamental shift in the role of marketing over the last 10 years. And what that book was about, so I recognizing that, I spent 6 years trying to understand it. And then I wrote it in a month in Australia. I went to Australia, so my parents were there, and I went and sat and wrote it in a month. Gave it to a few people. They said, it's amazing content, but it's not your style. You're not in it. So I then got peed off and let it lie for a year. And then I rewrote the whole thing from scratch with my style. And then it became, so it's probably a 6-7 week project in real terms, writing every day. And also I read a lot of books. You can see behind me, there's lots of books if you're seeing this on video. So I read books all the time. So I knew what kind of book I wanted to write, and I wanted colored pictures in it. And the publisher went mad, and all this sort of thing, because publishers don't want color inside the book because it costs a fortune. But I thought I'm going to make the bucket work harder than the original 6 steps that we created. So, and actually it's become, I'm really proud of what's in it. The people who are reading it are saying this is really helpful. It's one where you go by and you do each thing, and it tells you how to do it, and how to create a value proposition, how to create a psychographic plan. It's got it all in there. So it's kind of a semi-manual, but it's most important. It's a reframe of the role of marketing, and that's the significant part. And marketing has fundamentally changed.
And who should read it? I know who should read it. I want the listeners who may well fit this to know that this is definitely for them. So who should read this book?
Well, I think anybody who recognizes that a business is in fact commercialized relationships. That's all it is. So in other words, what you're building is a machine that commercializes relationships. If you recognize that as a phrase, then you should, in my opinion, be reading this book, because it will enable you to understand how to create commercialized relationships. And I've attempted in my style to address that particular issue. And so therefore you can be at pre-startup, startup, early stage. You can be at Chasm 2. You can be about to sell the business, and you need to get your ducks in a row. I mean, in reality, I've, as you mentioned in the intro, I've got Fortune 500 client at the moment. They read it and then came back to me and said, "We can't do this. Can you do this for us?" Yes, of course. So it's because they're too big. But if you're a sub 10 business, which is really who it was written for originally, this would be, I think, could be a really good read for you.
Yeah, awesome. So last couple of questions for you, Barnaby. What's the best advice you've ever received in your entire career? That you could, I'm sure you've received a lot of advice as much as you give advice, but what's the best that you've received?
Well, if you come to my office, you will find there are something like 300 folders. And in those 300 folders is every single piece of work I've ever created. And the best piece of advice was from that same mentor that I was mentioning earlier. He said, I said, what should I do? And he said, creative people keep copies of all their work, he said, but account men don't. He said, I recommend you think like a creative, behave like a creative, and you'll make a difference as an account man, strategic man. So the best piece of advice I think I've ever had is every single piece of work has been filed in what I call a brand book. So there are something like 300 brand books. I haven't got all 407 because some were early in my career, and I didn't. It wasn't quite the right thing to do then. And it means then that knowing that there are very, very few original ideas. That actually ideas tend to be. I have one of the most extraordinary boxes that I can put all of the brand work that I've ever done into, so that when I'm working with a business, I can actually produce something that people go, whoa, okay, we've never seen the world like that from our point of view, because my box is absolutely laid. And that's probably been the best advice. Keep a record of however you do it. And now it will be online. Yeah. It's not online because I wasn't born in that era. Keep a record of all the great things you've done. Journal it, do whatever. And that's the go back to place. And also I'm very Einstein about this. Einstein was famous for saying he didn't remember anything at all, as long as he knew he could look it up.
Yeah, which is it's quite clever. Yeah,
it is quite clever, and that kept his mind clear to do crazy thinking. And I found over the years that I'm really, really good at coming up with ideas very quickly, very energetically, ones that work, because my mind's clear, because I dumped everything into the books. Certainly.
So you might have a feeling that this is coming up. What's the worst advice you ever received?
Probably the worst advice I've ever received is investing in businesses I didn't know anything about. Yeah, it's just when during the difficult year, I used to invest in businesses, thinking, oh, this looks like a good idea. Taking equity instead of fees and things like that. It was just
it works for some, but very, very few. So yeah, I totally agree with you. I think I've got a drawer somewhere. I don't know where it is, but it was behind me or in a folder somewhere of pieces of paper that promised me a share of a thing that I'm 90% is defunct 8 years ago.
Yes, I'm afraid. Yes, I've got many of those as well.
Barnaby, branding genius. Thank you very much for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you very much, because it's been a real pleasure.
It's been lovely talking to you, and thanks very much for listening, everybody.